Good morning, everyone. We are on the record in case number 2025-00107, electronic application of Farmers Rural Electric Cooperative for general adjustment of rates. My name is Angie Hatton. I'm chair of the Kentucky Public Service Commission. With me today are Commissioner Mary Pat Regan and Commissioner Andrew Wood. If you have cellular telephones, please set them to silent at this time or turn them off. And the hearing today is for the purpose of taking evidence in this matter. At this time, let's have entry of appearance of counsel. And as each counsel introduces yourself, please also let me know what witnesses you brought today. For the applicant?
Allison Honaker, Honaker Law Office.
Heather Chapel, Honaker Law Office.
Good
Our
morning.
witnesses today are Tobias Moss, Jenny Phelps, and John Wilform.
All right, thank you. And for the Attorney General's office?
This is Thomas Tolan Lacey, and I'm joined today by Larry Cook. And as our witness today, we have Greg Meyer.
Good morning to all of you. And for staff?
Mariah Tessie and Ashley Hatcher.
Good morning. Okay. I've been told that public notice has been given and filed into the record. Is that correct?
Yes.
Any outstanding motions? I think confidentiality.
I think there's one, there are two confidentiality motions pending, but that's it.
Okay, so we'll handle those at a later date. Anything else? Any other pending motions? Okay. And then as far as public comment, I have not been told that there's any public comment waiting to give virtual public comment. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And is there anyone in the room who came here today for the purpose of giving public comment? Seeing none, I will note that anybody wishing to provide public comment may do so by following the instructions on Kentucky Public Service Commission's website. You can submit public comment by email at psc.comment@ky.gov, and let the record show that the instructions and link to provide public comment have been posted on our website for at least the past 24 hours. Okay. If there's nothing further, we'll move on to presentation of evidence, and counsel, you can call your first witness.
We call Tobias Moss to the scene.
Good morning, Mr. Moss. Would you raise your right hand to be sworn? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Please be seated,
Thank you.
counsel.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you please state your name and business address for the record?
Tobias Moss, 504 South Broadway, Glasgow, Kentucky.
And what is your title for Farmers R.E.C.C.?
President and Chief Executive Officer.
And did you cause testimony and responses to data requests to be filed into the record of this proceeding?
I did.
Do you have any additions or corrections to make to any of those documents?
I do not.
If I were to ask you those same questions today, would your responses be the same?
Yes, they would.
And is it your desire and intent to incorporate those into the record of this proceeding?
Yes.
The witness is available for cross.
Okay. Attorney General's office?
Good morning, Mr. Moss. I hope you're doing well today. Farmers Rec is requesting an increase of around $2,365,822, subject to check. Is that correct?
That sounds right, yes.
If that increase is granted in full, the average residential's customer's bill will increase by $7.99 or 5.92% per month, correct?
Based on the average consumption of 1,100 kWh a month, that is true.
In the pending rate case, Farmers is also asking for the monthly residential customer charge to be raised from $18.12 per month to $27.79, correct?
Yes.
This increase of the monthly residential customer charge you've requested amounts to a 53.37 increase. Isn't that true? Just of the customer charge.
Are you saying a percentage increase?
Yes, percentage.
That math sounds correct.
Mr. Moss, would you agree that farmer service area has economic challenges including high poverty rates?
High poverty rates, is that what
Yes.
you said? Yes, I do.
Please refer to Farmer's response to the Attorney General's first request for information, number 3, subsection A. let me know when you're there.
Okay.
Okay, the Attorney General asked for discussion concerning the economic issues that the company's customers are currently combating, correct?
That was asked, yes.
Please read your response into the record.
The rise of cost of living, inflationary pressures, and tightening financial conditions all weigh heavily on farmers' members.
Would you please turn to the Attorney General's first request for information, question number 3, subsection I, and read the poverty rates for all the counties in Farmer Service Territory into the record.
So amongst the counties in Farmers Territory, Adair County was 22.1%, Barron County 18.01%, Edmonson County 16%, Grayson County 17.8%, Greene County 17.6%, Hardin County 14.2%, Hart County 17.7%, LaRue County 16.1%, Metcalfe County 24.2%, Monroe County 23.7%, Warren County 14.2%.
Isn't it true that this will be farmer's second rate increase in approximately 2 years?
When this rate case takes effect, it will have been 3 years, but yes.
Would you admit that a second rate case in around 3 years coupled with high poverty rates could pose a financial burden on your company's customers?
I disagree with that sentiment. I actually feel that regular rate cases in a smaller interval of time imposes a smaller increase per rate case than a large one would be over a longer period of time, which I feel like would be more negatively impactful to all members.
Circling back to my earlier questions on rate increases, will other customer classes besides the residential classes see an increase to their average monthly bills?
Primarily, no. We focused on residential rate classes.
Could you explain why you did not propose an increase to any other classes that would affect the average monthly bills?
It was predominantly focused on our cost of service study, which found that the other, especially the commercial industrial classes, were already paying more. They were subsidizing the overall cost for the residential classes. That's the primary reason. Another reason was actually in our last rate case in 2023. We also asked for residential there for the same reason. We did, when we received the approved rates, it did impact our commercial accounts such that they were significantly impacted. In fact, one even wound up closing down. We had others that tried to pursue other rate categories that were not impacted by the findings. So it actually, I think the unintended consequence was deeper than it would have been. And again, the other classes are, according to the cost service study, are subsidizing the residential classes.
I have no further questions.
Okay. Staff.
Good morning, Mr. Ross.
Good morning.
If for some reason you're not best suited to answer the question, I know you and Ms. Phelps kind of overlapped at points in your testimony. Just tell me, I'll ask her instead, if that's okay.
Understood.
My first topic that I wanted to talk to you about is the employee benefit contribution. Can you talk a little bit about what goes into yours and the board's decision when it comes to the employer contribution to benefits?
For healthcare,
Yes.
I suppose what goes into our decision is while trying to be the best stewards of our members' money that we possibly can, we still have the opinion and position that we need to make sure that we have a robust and dedicated workforce to service those members. And so we try to, as is done with cooperatives throughout the nation, we try to give a competitive benefit package to those employees while not overburdening our members on the costs.
Are there certain criteria that you all look at from year to year with regard to making that decision as to what benefit package to offer?
We do review every year the costs of benefits. We've been using a consolidated platform that we use, administered by East Kentucky Power, that many of the cooperatives in the state use to reduce costs. We also look at other things. For example, we have a wellness program that we offer our employees that if they meet, that they get a physical and meet criteria established in that physical for wellness, then they get a reduction in, or they get some assistance in, for example, deductible costs. So we review it every year. We review what's needed every year. We did set our employee contribution for 2025, starting in 2025 at 12% of employee contribution. That was 100%, that decision was made 100% based on the requirements that we received from the commission in the 2023 rate case, as well as in the 2017 rate case.
So, you mentioned year to year, you evaluate the criteria, and you mentioned 2025's contribution percentage. Knowing what the commission has offered in guidance in the prior orders, can you explain why the contribution percentage might fluctuate from year to year then?
I started working at Farmers Rural Electric in 2023, January 23, so I can't speak to what the decisions were before then. I know in 23, it was brought to me and the board, and we decided to leave things as they were. After we received the response from the rate case, we reviewed, what we had and what was set up, and that was the, I'd say, the primary criteria of what that caused us to decide to change it to in 25 to 12%.
So since you've been there at least, the commission's guidance has driven to some degree the employer contribution percentage?
Primarily, yes.
Okay. And I know you all provided a third-party study in Discovery in response to a request from staff. And I think it was more like a general market study. Have you all done any salary or benefit study involving you all with the other R.E.C.Cs or with R.E.C.Cs in another state?
We've not done a formalized study. I do poll our peer R.E.C.Cs. I'm also, in my specific case, I came from another rural electric cooperative in another state, so of course I poll them as well. But we've not done a formal study.
Based on just your informal study or talking to other people, how do your benefit packages compare to other R.E.C.Cs?
In other states?
Or here, either one.
Inside the state of Kentucky, I'd say it's relatively comparable. Actually, in some cases, we have a little bit less benefit than some others. We don't have, in the case of Farmers Rural Electric, we do not currently have collective bargaining, so we don't have contracts where that's concerned. And I know some of the co-ops that do have a more robust benefits package than we do. In the case of, for example, the co-op that I came from before I came to Kentucky, to be perfectly candid, we're not close to the benefits package that they carry.
Okay. Now, I'm going to shift gears a little bit to the right-of-way and right-of-way budgeting. Can you talk a little bit about what goes into your right-of-way planning for the year?
At its simplest state, we have approximately 3,600 miles of line that we maintain, and so we try to divide that up on a per year basis. But then we also look at what circuits are within that confine. We try to look at what circuits are amenable to get to. And then, are you asking how we go about the bids process, or?
Well, no, not so much the bidding process, but how do you decide which circuits you're gonna clear and how many miles you're gonna clear each year?
Well, how many miles we'd like to clear is based on, I mean, quite simply, dividing the 3,600 by, you know, the hope is to ultimately get down to a reasonable year track of being able to maintain the system. The longer we go.
Can I interrupt you right there for a
Sure.
second? With that, you mentioned the cycles and all that. So what is farmers' like ideal cycle for clearing? Is it 5 or 7 or 8 or?
In a perfect world, it'd be about that. It'd be about 6 years in a perfect world.
Okay, so what is it generally now? Like
It's more than 10 now.
more than 10, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm sorry, you can go back to responding.
So with respect to essentially what we anticipate revenue to be, what we anticipate, you know, essentially what we anticipate to have financially, then that's, you know, our second measure. So our first measure is, you know, if we can do, for example, and this is just an example, 400 miles in a year, then we'll look at, is it possible to do that given what our budgetary constraints are? And if the answer is no, then we have to back that down.
Okay. At what point do you make the decision that, okay, so say you review it in January and you decide, you know, how many miles you're gonna clear that year. At what point during the year would you look at it and evaluate whether you'll be able to achieve that or whether you're gonna fall short of that?
Well, let me make sure I understand your question. When you say whether we're going to achieve it, do you mean whether we have to cut it back?
Basically, do you have the money to reach your goal, or are you gonna have to reduce your goal?
So typically, by the end of first quarter of every year, based on how our rates are structured right now, we're going to have a pretty good idea of what that answer is going to be. And the reason being, with our rates the way they're structured, January and mostly January, but certainly January, February, and some into March, that's usually our peak season. So that's when we're going to generate the most revenue and give us a feel for what the year is going to look like from a revenue perspective, just based on the weather. If it's a light January, February, March, then we know that we're not going to have enough revenue to sustain what we budgeted for the year likely. Conversely, if it's a very extreme January, which actually this year, 2025, is a great example of that. It was a very extreme weather January, but that also meant that it was a very extreme from a wholesale power cost perspective. So it didn't actually, even though it was that extreme, it didn't actually aid in our revenue. In fact, it impacted us negatively this year in revenue. Our power cost was much higher than we budgeted for this year.
Okay. So, I know you all have two right-of-way contractors that clear for you all?
No, we bid every year, and this year we had budgeted for actually 3 contractors on different circuits, and actually one, and then another one that does herbicide.
Okay. I know that you provided some examples, I guess, or scenarios that you use to calculate the test year's right-of-way expense. Can you talk about why you all went with scenarios to come up with the budget for the test year's right-of-way expense?
What we found was we essentially tried to do our best pricing on a per circuit basis. So we bid out all the different circuits that we anticipated to cut, and then we looked at the quotes from each vendor on those different circuits. And then we divided up the work based on the best quotes on a per circuit basis, so that we could enjoy better cost savings. Using one vendor, you know, it would have actually wound up being more expensive if we used one vendor for the whole project.
Okay. I think that's all I have. I think that's all I have for Mr. Moss.
Okay. Commissioner Wood?
I'd like to ask a question about the, I guess, the monthly charge going up. Is there a reason why the Farmers has chosen to go with a higher monthly fee instead of a higher energy charge?
Well, a couple of reasons. One is the energy charge can't be depended upon. And actually, one of the reasons, I mean, after our rate case in '23, I think is a great example of that, because we instituted those rates in, I think it was September, October of '23, after that was approved in that streamline case. And then it turned out that the winter of '24 was milder than anticipated, so we didn't make nearly as much revenue as we had hoped. The other reason, which is really more important to me, is that the, you know, what we're trying to focus on is covering the fixed costs of our distribution system. An analogy I use quite often, as it pertains to rural electric cooperatives, our average member count per mile of line is 7. So we have 7 members per mile of line. If you look at that versus, for example, an investor-owned utility or a municipal, they have anywhere from 25 to 35 customers per that mile of line. That mile of line costs the same to build, whether I do it or whether an IOU does it or whether a muni does it. The difference is how we can spread that fixed cost across those, you know, across those residents. By focusing on an energy charge versus a fixed charge, what we're doing is anyone who uses more energy is subsidizing that fixed cost that everyone else is enjoying the service from. And where that significantly negatively impacts to me is the lower income, because there was, for example, a Department of Energy study that came out in 2022 that said that mobile homes and trailers use 35% more energy than single-family homes. And so, in fact, the Biden administration passed a law that actually restated the manufacturing requirements of mobile homes that took effect in '23 for this very reason, because they use 35% more energy. And so, you know, when we have that many people that are using that much more energy because of the efficiency of their home, they're actually subsidizing the ones that have more expensive, you know, energy efficient homes and so on. And I don't think that's fair for them either. And so, you know, we want to focus on the energy charge that gives a more levelized bill throughout the year. And for those that actually do use more energy, it's actually less impactful to them than if we focused on energy charge, which actually would be significantly more impactful for them in those peak areas, in peak times of year.
Very well, thank you.
Commissioner Lincoln?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. You asked the question I was going to ask, so I'll just move to the right-of-way. And as, am I understanding that the, depending on the revenue, will weigh into the goal of what the right-of-way you can do per year? Is that what you were saying?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you said you had 3 bids out for the right-of-way?
We had more than 3 bids that we received. We selected 3.
And are you competing with all the other electric companies for the right-of-way across the state? So would they be bidding out to the same?
I'm not 100% sure if they all bid to the same exact vendors we do. I mean, there is a common thread, you know, some known vendors throughout the state that do some of the work. I'm not 100% sure if, I know we do have, you know, we bid to those vendors, and then we also, you know, we entertain anybody that wants to bid. We do have criteria that we require on their experience, on their locality, you know, which determines what their dependability will be on, whether they're going to be on site to do the work. Things like that. We do concern ourselves with that. But what we done, and then, by the way, we also, you know, we established some expectations of that vendor on, you know, being able to complete the work. So even if we're using a vendor that also works in other parts of the state, I wouldn't say that we're competing with that, because they have crews dedicated to that part of, for example, let's say Owen Electric, they have crews dedicated to Owen Electric, that vendor would, and then they would have other crews dedicated to farmers.
I know that we had talked a little bit in previous meetings about pooling companies and pooling resources for the right-of-way, because
You mean amongst other
amongst
cooperatives?
other co-ops. Has there been any further discussion on that?
Myself and my peers do talk about these things, and we certainly, in my opinion, are sensitive to the requests that you all have made as it pertains to that. So far, we've not found that that we see a benefit there, simply because just in my territory alone, just in Farmers Territory alone, I have 11 counties we touch, but 3 primarily, Hart, Metcalfe, and Barron. The terrain between Hart and Barron are significantly different terrain. And of course, as we go further out into the state, that becomes more projected. And so, the costs that someone might, what I want to make sure that we don't do, just like we talked about with the consumption rates, I don't want Farmers Rural Electric members to subsidize anything that's going on in other parts of the state. And if the vendor is going to levelize their cost across the state based on, using a pool of utilities, then the likelihood is that what they're doing is somebody is subsidizing the other portion of that work. And that's not fair to the members of Farmers. So, again, the way that we make the fairness to the members of Farmers is we essentially have those vendors compete with each other for our business.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Moss.
Good morning.
Sticking with the right-of-way topic, you had testified earlier that you're, in an ideal world, you'd do a 6-year cycle,
Yes, ma'am.
but you're doing probably more like 10.
More than 10.
Yeah. So I would like to figure out what's stopping you from getting to the ideal right-of-way clearance. It doesn't look like you're budgeting enough each year to do the right-of-way. A lot of times with co-ops, we have a problem with them budgeting way too much for right-of-way and then using that money for other things. It's kind of the opposite here. So I was looking at the amount you've budgeted for right-of-way each year, and it's not targeted toward that ideal time frame. And then you're actually not even meeting the amount you budget for yourself. So can you explain that to me a little bit?
Well,
That was a big, broad, convoluted question, but I'm giving you an opportunity to explain it to me.
I think I understand the spirit of your question, Chairman. I pride myself, and I know that our Vice President of Finance and Accounting, Jenny Phelps, prides herself on realistic budgets. And so we're not going to put forth a budget to our board or to our members that we know we're not going to be able to achieve. We're still in, frankly, a catch-up mode. The revenue that we base it 100% off of the revenue we expect to make. And what it comes down to is when we're not even making that revenue, then, we have to back it off. We ride very, very tightly to the minimum required, if actually not dip below, which we have done a couple years now, below the required O tier that's required from RUS. And so we're trying to make sure that we get ourselves into a position to get the cooperative into a better financial state such that we can do that in the future. But right now, we just don't feel like we've had the money to be able to budget that. And again, we don't want to be unrealistic. We don't want to set these expectations out there that, we full well know we're not going to be able to achieve.
There's repercussions, though, in costs for not clearing right-of-way. Have you seen increased outages or storm damage?
So, we've done, I don't think that we've had an increase in outage counts in the past few years, absent major storms. That's one of the things that I think is significant in this case, not in our case, but in all cases, is, we've had, in my tenure, and I've only been here since January 23, we've had 4 named FEMA event storms. We have to pay for the restoration out of our pockets. If FEMA reimburses us, then they do at 75% of the costs, but that doesn't come for anywhere from 6 to 12 months later, so we have to front that money. We've also had several storms now that have not been FEMA reportable, one of which cost us nearly $1 million in restoration. We didn't get a penny in reimbursement on that. And so that's where, if anything, if our outage numbers, absent those storms, have been relatively reasonable in comparison to, certainly to our peers in the state. One of the reasons is because of this herbicide program that we're pretty aggressive on. So that's a much cheaper method, but what you're doing is, one of the biggest expenses we have with right-of-way is, we refer to inside farmers as logging, because the trees have grown so big that we have to actually log them out. It's not just cutting down some underbrush. And so we're getting to the point where we've tried to focus on the circuits that is required to try to get that minimized, and then stay on top of those circuits with the herbicide program, such that once we can eliminate the logging part of our right-of-way business, then we'll be able to be much more maintainable at that case, in that respect. But going back to your question, I don't feel like our outage numbers have been significantly higher of late, as it relates to right-of-way, and I give a lot of credit to our team, that again, they're trying to focus on the circuits that are known to be. We do an inspection program. I think that's every single pole in our circuit gets visited at least once every 2 years, and that's part of that program, is to see if there's an area that we know that is kind of a, I guess, red flag, for lack of a better word, then we try to focus on those as well and make sure that we can maintain our system as best we can.
In general, it's cheaper to prevent the vegetation-caused outages than it is to clean up after it.
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I look at it as, you could save a lot of money by not changing the oil in your car, but eventually that's going to get back to you. And so I feel the same way about our right-of-way, and that's one of our, our desires. Our board desires it, our staff desires it, our team desires to be able to get into a more robust right-of-way program. And I just think, once again, 2025, I know that was not a test year, but actually I should go back. 24 is a great example, because we expected, extra money in revenue for the year in 24, and it just was a mild winter. So we didn't get the money we expected. Mm-hmm. And that's because, we had half of our rate went into the consumption charge instead of the energy charge. And so we couldn't plan on that. We tried to plan on that money as part of our revenue for the year, but it just didn't turn out that way.
So I could ask Ms. Phelps a little bit more about this, because I think it came from her testimony. But in general, your utilities rates are very weather dependent.
Absolutely.
And is the remedy for fixing that increasing the customer charge rather than depending on the energy charge?
That's part of the reason, but it's less about, it is about the revenue. It's about having a more predictable, standardized revenue throughout the year. But it's also, again, to ensure that our higher consuming members are not subsidizing the rest of the fixed charges.
So you're actually proposing to decrease your energy charge?
Yes.
I don't think I've seen that in any cases.
And again, that's out of fairness to especially our members that have more consumption.
Sure.
Quick question, of the 4 storms where you filed for FEMA reimbursement, have you received that money? All of it?
I
Or are you
think,
still
is there
waiting
one
on
left?
it?
There's one left we haven't yet, which was this year.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and then if you're not the right person to answer this one, just direct me to which of your witnesses would be better, but I would like an explanation about the change in time of use based on the time zone and how that works.
I'm gonna have to defer that to John Wolfram.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll ask him about that then. Anything further, Commissioner? Redirect?
I think I just have one question. When you're talking about the right-of-way, we've had lots of questions about right-of-way. You're not requesting a pro forma to get you all the way down to like a 7-year cycle or a 6-year cycle, is that correct?
That's correct.
What is the adjustment that you're making in this one? What do you think that would help you cut this year? If you, in a perfect world, if you get all the revenue that you need and you can do all of the right-of-way that you need to do, what would that get you at?
Well, for 2026, it's not going to actually, if we're approved for everything we asked for in the rate case, we still won't have that revenue till by the end of '26. So it's really '27 is when we could really start implementing that cash to start doing the work. In '26, we're looking at budgeting between 300, a little more than 300 miles for the year, based on our, on what we anticipate right now. But, I think it's important to recognize that, whatever's approved by the commission, we don't get that money on day one. It's going to take the year for us to get whatever revenue is approved.
And again, just because you get, say they give you the 2.3 million rough number that you asked for, there's no guarantee that you're gonna have that 2.3 million in revenue that comes in, correct?
Absolutely. That's part of my point, yeah.
Right. And you'll have, the customer charge, if you get that increase, that will help know kind of what is gonna come in, because that's a steady fixed monthly charge.
Right.
But there's still also an energy charge there.
There's
And
still-
that's gonna be dependent.
Right. I mean, still almost 80% of an average member's bill is still their energy charge.
All right, I have nothing further.
Okay, any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Staff?
No, Your Honor.
Your brother?
No.
All right. Since you're lead witness, I, in general, wouldn't excuse you and would ask you to stick around for the remainder of the hearing today in case we need to recall you, but you can step down from the stand.
Thank you.
And when you're ready, call your next witness.
Just really call it Miss Jenny Phelps, please.
Would you raise your right hand to be sworn as self? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Please be seated. Counsel.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and your business address?
My name is Jenny Phelps. The business address is 504 South Broadway, Glasgow, Kentucky.
And at Farmers R.E.C.C, what is your title?
I am the Vice President of Finance and Accounting.
And did you provide testimony or responses to data requests in this case?
I did.
And do you have any revisions, amendments, or edits to any of that testimony or responses to data requests?
I do not.
And then, but we
Right,
will
we
note
filed
that
that.
there
Yeah.
was an errata to her original testimony filed, which it just corrected the O tier number.
O tier number. I incorrectly stated that in the application. It's a 1.10 operating tier, so we did correct that.
And then including that errata, do you now adopt all of your testimony and responses to data requests? And is it your intent to have those incorporated into this proceeding?
It is.
Thank you. And then Ms. Phelps is available for cross.
Thank you.
Good morning,
Mr.
Ms.
Lacey?
Good morning, Ms. Phelps. Farmers is requesting the commission to approve an O tier of 1.85, which in this case translates to a tier of 2.10, correct?
The correct is, yes, 1.85 operating tier. Yes.
And that translates, in this case, to a 2.10 tier?
Subject to check, I'll say yes to that.
The minimum tier ratio required by the R.E.C.C and FFB loans is a tier of 1.25, correct?
The tier is 1.25, the operating tier is 1.10.
Okay. So that answers actually my next question. So the
Okay.
minimum O tier required for those is a 1.1, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Now this might, we might have to ask a post-hearing data request for this one. But has Farmers calculated the O tier in tier through August of this year?
I have it through July, so it would have to be a data request through August.
Okay, what is it currently in July, or the July numbers?
And I did say that, let me see if I have that in my testimony here.
In your rebuttal.
I thought it was. Yeah, through July, we have an operating tier of 1.04.
Okay, that actually answers all my questions I have for you today. Thank
Oh,
you so
okay.
much.
Okay, staff?
Thank you. Ms. Phelps, we will, if you're not the best person to answer, just let me know and I will ask Mr. Wolfram, because I think that's kind of how the flow went in my questioning. I want to start talking about the interest expense. I know you provided some testimony about the steps that Farmers R.E.C.C. has taken to reduce its interest expense, and I know it's mentioned as one of the drivers to this particular rate application. Can you explain a little bit more about what you all have done this year to reduce your interest expense? Have you explored other options,
Other options.
like
as
other
in-
refinancing options or anything like that?
Well, as far as the FFB debt that we have, or there's no refinancing options for that right now. We previously had some RUS debt that was on our books, and years ago, we refinanced that to lower rates as well. So for years, we were living on the 90-day FFB rates, which I jokingly always said was 0.00 nothing. And then, as you all know, since COVID and the economy, those rates have continued to climb. So we did, and I'm not sure if that's in 2023 or 2024, I think 2023, we locked in those variable short-term rates to longer rates. All of those we were able to get at less than 5% interest rates. So we do monitor what short-term and long-term debt rates are, given that, most of our money is from RUS, which in the past has been financed through FFB, Federal Financing Bank. Most of our assets, the majority of them, of course, are long-term assets, and that needs to be funded with long-term debt. So I don't recall the exact percentage at the end of 2024 as what was short-term and what was long-term, but we do focus having more fixed long-term debt than we do the short-term.
Okay. And then I believe your adjustment in this case was based on, I think it was test year cost of debt is normalized to annual cost rate, and then there's a little formula that was given. Can you explain why farmers felt like it was better to normalize the interest than provide the actual interest expense for the adjustment?
I believe that's typical in the pro forma adjustments to normalize the interest expense.
Is that how
That's
you-
what I've seen, and that's what we have done in past cases as well. Not to defer to John, but he could possibly expand on that. But we followed the same procedures that we have done in the past as far as the pro forma adjustments and as it relates to interest expense.
Okay, and maybe I missed it, but have you all provided the actual interest expense for the past 3 or 4 years, or, I'm sorry, the forecasted interest expense for the next 3 or 4 years in the discovery?
I do not believe that that was a question that we had, but we can provide that in post-hearing data request.
Okay. The other question I have, and do you have access to the application in front of you? Do you?
I can, yeah.
Okay, because it's PDF page 286 of the application file. Which I think is a consolidated financial statement.
Let me make it bigger, Jenny.
No, I can see it.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so we just had a question about the loan that Farmers Energy Propane Plus took out, the 36-month agreement with the Shelby Propane Plus to borrow $200,000. That was a debt that was supposed to mature in August of 2025, and it was paid off early in 2023. Is that summary correct so far?
Yes, as stated in the consolidated audited financial here, yes.
And can you confirm that that debt was paid off with funds from the Farmers Energy Propane Plus company and not Farmers R.E.C.C.?
It was paid off with the Farmers Energy Propane Plus,
Okay.
yeah. Our consolidated audit report, of course, includes Farmers R.E.C.C. and then the propane company. And so that would be a statement based upon the propane books.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm. Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
The next topic, I'm gonna shift gears just a bit. We've talked about right-of-way expense and how you all manage the costs. And I believe in your rebuttal, you talked a little bit more about what Mr. Moss referred to, I think it was almost $1 million in storm damage. That was a direct cost for farmers and its members. I think that was in your rebuttal on page 8. What options do you all have to recover or spread out that expense when you incur such a large expense?
So it was over $900,000, that's what you're speaking about,
Mhm.
yeah. So when we have these FEMA storms, some of which is maintenance expense, which is a direct expense for the year applied directly to the income statement, which of course lowers your net margins, lowers your operating tier. There is some work that is done that is what we would call job related, and that can be applied to our construction work plan, and we can request funds on that.
Have you all considered budgeting for storm damage expense in your regular budget?
I have not in the past, but I think I even mentioned this in my rebuttal. Come October 1st, this will mark 16 years that I've been at Farmers R.E.C.C., and it wasn't until December 2021 that we experienced our first FEMA event. And it seems like every year going forward now, there's some kind of storm-related issue that we're experiencing. So it's not typical to budget for the unknowns, but it feels like these are starting to be more and more. And if you look to, I know 2023 is not our test year, but if you were to look back on 2023, we had negative margins for the year. And that is all directly related to having such a large storm that was not covered by FEMA.
So, in a post-hearing data request, would you be able to provide those numbers? I know you mentioned 2021 was the first year that you can recall. Would you be able to provide those non-reimbursed FEMA storm-related expenses in a data request?
I can. The primary one that you're gonna see is from 2023.
Okay.
And I believe if I go back and look at the Form 7, which is our financials that we report to RUS, USDA, there was a note in there that explained exactly what portion of that applied to the expense side on our income statement and then what applied to construction work plan.
So this kind of ties in with the right-of-way and the storm expense. When you all look at your budget, and I know Mr. Moss mentioned like the first quarter gives you some idea of what you're gonna have to work with the rest of the year.
Mm-hmm.
When you all go to evaluate your budget at the end of the first quarter, how do you decide what to prioritize as far as funding when it looks like the margins aren't going to be what you had expected?
Well, and this goes back to our discussion about operating tier as well. We've explained this before, maybe in a Kentucky Living article to our members, but if you just take $1 of revenue and just look at what we have operating margins wise, and I'll use 2024 as our test year, an example from that. So with every $1 of revenue that we earn, 71 cents of that goes to East Kentucky Power for our purchase power cost. Now that can vary year to year. In 2024, it was 71 cents. And then about a penny goes towards margins, operating margins. And that leaves us 28 cents of that $1 to work with our operating expenses. The biggest operating expenses that we have our payroll and benefits and right away. So if things are not looking good, the unfortunate reality is we have to stop cutting right away. And that is the situation that we've gotten in time and time again. So as Mr. Moss spoke to, the first quarter is typically when we make a lot of our margins with the winter weather. If we have a mild winter, then, I mean, we can predict really what's gonna happen for the rest of the year. So, I think in my rebuttal testimony, I even talked about this year. I think it was a maybe colder January, but we had some high, East Kentucky power bills. And so that really, instead of that 71 cents that I talked about earlier, right now, January through July 2025, 73 cents of that $1 in revenue is going to East Kentucky Power. So the pocket change just keeps getting smaller and smaller of what we can spend on operating expenses there at the co-op. So I went around and around, and I've forgotten what your beginning question was.
Well, it was, how do you all prioritize your discretionary spending? And you kind of answered it with the right-of-way is obviously one of the first things. And I know some testimony's been provided about your donations and community, like, activities, since that's discretionary spending as well. Where does that fall in the, I know some of it is not, like Kentucky Living, to some degree, you all use that for notices and that type of thing.
Right.
But where would that fall on the prioritization scale?
Well, I would argue a lot of that is not discretionary. So I know the bulk of that, well, I won't say bulk, over 50% is related to Kentucky Living. I mean, that is a means in which we communicate with our members. But also some of the bigger expenses that are listed there is our dues to NRECA, and then also our dues to statewide. And statewide provides a great service to us in that we work with them with our safety programs. They also help us with training that we do with all employees. So those items there that I mentioned are not items that we would cut. So, and I know that we have some expenses that are related to donations as well, but I believe John mentioned in his rebuttal testimony, there is something to be said about being a co-op, and he talked about our 7 principles that we live by, and one of those is the commitment and concern for our community. Our donations, in my eyes, are not absolutely ridiculous. You all may think otherwise. We say no to a lot of things that come in, but it's also important to us to contribute to the communities in which we live in and to do certain things for those as well. So we have had in 2025 to make some hard decisions of not giving certain donations because of the way the financials are looking right now. And again, let me say this, in the pro forma in 2024, those dues, donations, and advertisings were $300,000. And although that's a large sum of money, I mean, our right-of-way is over $2 million. So again, when you're trying to make the cuts, you're gonna go for the largest ticket items.
Okay. There, and speaking of right-of-way, was there, you all responded to the Attorney General's request for, I believe it was 5 years of right-of-way clearing data. It was the Attorney General's first request, item 46, that, and I'll give you a second.
Is it an Excel spreadsheet or was it in the actual responses? Do you know?
I think that was an actual response.
And you said item 46?
Mm-hmm. Is there some particular or a particular reason that you all were unable to provide the 5 years of right-of-way clearing data?
No, we have that information.
Okay.
Of course, a lot of that data would have been filed in our streamline case, in our last case.
Okay. And then the last thing I wanted to ask, kind of, and it will be more of a post-hearing data request, because I think you were with farmers at the streamline and the last general rate case.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. And I know there were some questions asked in the past cases about the credit card fees that you all are absorbing.
Okay,
And staff will include a post-hearing data request for 2024, the fees you all paid, and for the year to date.
okay.
So that'll be in a post-hearing request. But that's all I have for Ms. Phelps.
Okay. Commissioner Wood?
Have you had any complaints about the amount of charitable giving that the company engages in? Any complaints from the public?
No.
That's the only question I have.
Commissioner Regan?
I don't have any.
Okay, just a few. Thank you for providing that information about how much weather has changed over the 16 years that you've been there. Did you say since 2023, you've had a FEMA event every year?
December 2021, that was when the tornadoes came through Warren County, and then we had a tornado that hit in our service territory also, so,
The last 4 years?
yeah.
Since 2021 through 2024, you had a FEMA claim. So that sounds like the norm now, as far as we
I
can tell.
hope not, but yeah, it does seem like that we're gonna have more of these storms.
So for your future filings, do you think you would include storm damage recovery, like try to normalize that and include it in your budget?
Include in our budget. I'm gonna say I don't know. I would like to have a budget in which that we had enough revenue to first cover the expenses that we know that we need to cover, and that includes our right-of-way. Because I believe it was discussed earlier about maybe we're not spending as much as we should. But we've talked about this some. We have trouble in the past years, and we had in 2024 of not meeting our operating tier. So looking at the average best 2 out of 3 years, we were below that 1.10 threshold. And again, when things start to go a little haywire, you have to look to expenses that you have there at the co-op that you can no longer do, or you need to remove from your budget. And right away is the big ticket item. So we just do not have enough right away or enough revenue right now to cover the right away. So that would be what I would like to look through to first. And I will say on the right-of-way portion of it, our ultimate goal is to trim between 300 and 400 miles of lawn. I think we say that in our rebuttal testimony. And Mr. Moss
39
mentioned,
last year, something like that.
yes, and we were able to meet our budget last year on right-of-way. Unfortunately, we had some unexpected expenses as it relates to right-of-way. Mr. Moss talked about that some. The logging of the trees, the removal. You know, when you get further and further away from that cycle that you want, and we are looking, I would say it would be more of a 7 to 8 year cycle than, I know Mr. Moss mentioned 6, but I think we're more with the 300 to 400 miles of line, it'll probably be 7 to 8 year cycle. But when you're so far away from that and you haven't been able to trim trees in a circuit, those get huge. And then you have to pay for removals of that too. And that's what we saw in 2024, that it had been so long since some of these circuits had been trimmed that there were large trees in those, and we were having to pay extra for that.
So you didn't really have a logging budget.
We had a logging budget, but it wasn't, we call it removals, but it wasn't as large as it should have been.
Are they
Yeah.
large enough that you could get revenue from the logs?
Well, but we don't do that.
So you talked about the 71 cents per dollar that goes to EKPC. This year might be 73 cents per dollar.
Right now, when we look January through July, it is tracking at 73 cents. And
then
I
you
can
said-
provide any of that data if you need
There
that.
was an additional 1 cent, and I didn't catch where the additional 1 cent goes.
Margins, operating margins,
And then that leaves you 28 cents for your operating
Right.
expenses. So in the 2023 case, you would increase the customer charge, I believe, by $4. Does that sound right?
yes.
Okay. Did you notice a difference in your budgeting when you increased that customer charge? Did that make you a bit less dependent on weather? Was that, can you track whether there was a positive outcome from that increase?
I'm gonna say that it wasn't a substantial enough to notice, because in that cost of service study, if I recall correctly from our streamline, it showed that the residential fixed charge should be $25.50. So we were closer to that $25.50, but of course not at that.
You increased from, what, $14 to $18, I think?
I
like
believe
that.
that's correct, yeah.
But
So,
it wasn't enough for you to really notice in your budgeting?
no, ma'am. And now, of course, the cost of service study is showing that it should be $27.78, which is that we're requesting now. And that, of course, our expenses increase, and that becomes a moving target as well, upward trend. So the closer that we can get to that number, would help in just having a fixed cost monthly that we know, a pot of money, a pot of revenue, that we would know that we would have coming in.
God forbid we have another FEMA event this year. I've been told to shush. And, obviously, no one wants that.
No.
But assuming it continues this trend that we've had since 2021, does it make sense to start to include some sort of major storm damage cleanup? Because it's not all going to be covered by FEMA.
Right, right.
Especially with potential cuts into FEMA.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to start to try to normalize that and include it in the budget?
Maybe it does. Maybe that is something that I need to look at. But again, I would like to have the revenues that cover what needs to be done on a day-to-day basis.
Maybe you just love coming to see us way more often.
This is not my favorite part of my job.
I think it's perfectly pleasant, but it's good. Okay, that's all the questions I have unless there's further follow-up from the commissioners. Okay, redirect.
Just a few questions. To the chairman's point about including storm expenses in the budget, and you saying you wanna cover what you already have. If you were to include storm expenses in the budget, would that have made the request in this case higher?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And so, by not including it, but asking to make sure you cover your O tier, that was a way to keep the cost low for the low-income members that the Attorney General was mentioning.
Right.
And then, as to O tier, could you kind of provide a broader, I guess, kind of discussion on why farmers chose to base this rate case on O tier instead of tier?
Well, again, it goes back to the example that I gave with the $1 revenue and what our operating expenses are. Operating expenses to us is what we can control there at Farmers R.E.C.C. So the operating margins, per requirements of RUS, it has to be a 1.10. And in my past almost 16 years experience, if we're not going to meet a lender requirement, which we are obligated to meet all of those, including operating tier, it is typically based on the operating tier that we have an issue meeting. So given that, that is why we decided to develop this case in terms of operating tier instead of tier. So I believe John noted in his rebuttal testimony that our last case, even though it was streamlined, when the decision was made on the order, we were given tier of 2.0. And even with that tier, over the last 3 years, it's operating tier that continues to be the issue.
And the commission has some other cases in front of it and that have talked about this dreaded letter to RUS if you don't make your obligations. Is Farmers in that position?
Well, I believe the Attorney General asked this question as to where operating tier is this year. And as stated, from January through July, we have an operating tier right now of 1.04. We have, and I believe I mentioned this in rebuttal also, we are not cutting circuit work right now because I do not want a dreaded letter. It is our desire to make sure that we meet operating tier. And again, right away is the first thing that
Yeah,
goes
because,
away.
what happens if you default on your RUS fund? You don't meet those requirements.
I don't want to know. No, we'll get a letter. We'll have to
Yeah, yeah.
respond via letter. And I don't know if there's additional documentation that they need in regards to that, but it would be my preference not to find out what it means to not make operating tier 2 years in a row.
And I know, all of the EKPC co-ops talk to each other, so you've spoken with some of those other people, and some cooperatives have been in for a streamline rate case. Do you know in those streamline proceedings, and this is only if you know, have they been given the 1.850 tier in streamline proceedings?
I believe so. I don't, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, and then I just have a couple more, oh, go ahead.
I do want to say to that, maybe, I didn't look as hard as what the
Yeah.
operating tier was, but I did notice that the customer charge has increased on the distribution cases that have been. And it seems that distribution co-ops are getting closer to that fixed customer charge that is needed. And of course, in our case, is the $27.78.
And then kind of back to the dues and donations issue, you kind of talked about the safety training that is provided by KEC.
Mhm.
If you all had to pay that yourselves, would that be more than the dues you pay to KEC?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We would have to hire a safety director. So, yeah, the services that they provide do help us to keep our costs down and to keep our employee count down also.
And I don't believe I have any other follow-up questions, thank you.
Okay.
Recross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, staff?
Just one. Ms. Temple kind of was trying to get to it, I think, but I'll just ask flat out. How did
Okay.
you all decide to ask for a 1.850 tier?
Again, that is traditionally what we have seen the commission award is a 1.85 operating tier. And that is, I think it goes back to everyone's hung up on what we need is just a 1.10 operating tier in order to meet our lender requirements. Will has been pointing out here, you can have unexpected expenses and that can just blow the chances of having that whatsoever. And even in the cases where we have been awarded a 2.0 tier, I mean, we're nowhere close to that tier being made. We still have expenses that maybe, well, not maybe, they were included as pro forma adjustments, and one of those being the $300,000 dues, advertising, and donations. We will continue to have those charges, and so that is reflected, of course, in the operating tier that we're going to have. So it feels appropriate that we would go again with something that we've had trouble making in the past and use that as our basis to form this case.
So I have another, well, I'm sorry. I said I was only gonna ask one more. Can I ask one more? Of course. Sorry. You all asked to remove the entirety of like your Kentucky Living, even though you mentioned in your rebuttal, and then you've just responded to Ms. Temple about it was cheaper to pay your dues than actually do the education. Was there any discussion about not making the entirety of that $300,000 or so adjustment and trying to leave some of that in the revenue requirement?
No, but going forward there will be. So I applaud Bluegrass Energy for, in their case, mentioning with the Kentucky Living, the pages that they did use for the fuel adjustment clause and other things that were related to to the members. I think, and I'll take responsibility to this myself, I think we have not done, as a distribution co-op, a good job in the past explaining exactly what those donation and dues and advertisements are for and the importance of them. I think some of those fit sometimes more into an IOU than into a co-op structure. And going forward, we'll do a better job with that and look to see if some of that, instead of all of it, has to be excluded.
Thank you.
That's it? Anything further? Anything further? Any reason why this witness couldn't be excused?
No.
Okay,
Ma'am,
thank
you're
you.
excused. I think it'd be a good time to just take a quick 15-minute break, and then we'll get back to your next witness. We are back on the record, case number 2025-00107, and I see that Mr. Wolfram has already been called up to the stand. Would you raise your right hand to be sworn? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do, so help me God.
Okay, thank you. And counsel?
Could you state your full name and place of employment for the record?
Yes, my name is John Wolfram. I'm with Catalyst Consulting LLC.
And did you provide any testimony or responses to data requests in this proceeding?
I did.
And do you have any revisions, amendments, edits, or anything like that to your previously filed testimony or data request responses?
I do not.
And is it your intention to adopt those responses into the record of this proceeding today?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. And Mr. Wolfram is available for cross. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lacy?
Attorney General has no questions for Mr. Wolfram today.
Okay. Staff?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Wolfram, I know that you answered some of your data requests in conjunction with Ms. Phelps, so if you're not the best person, just let me know. But generally, with regard to the non-recurring charges, I know that there were several. Can you tell me or confirm that no adjustment for any sort of labor expense related to those non-recurring charges was made in the revenue requirement, to the revenue requirement, I mean?
Give me one moment, please. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then specifically with regard to the reconnection charge, I think that the cost justification was provided in response to staff's data request, second data request, item 5. And I'll give you a minute.
Am I a respondent on that question? I don't know if I have that one in my book here.
Okay.
I just pulled it up on the screen.
The little screen.
Yeah, you're gonna have to help me with that because it looks like it's at the home screen.
Did we disconnect?
This guy, sorry.
That's okay.
I guess because they went to sleep.
While I wait, can you, was that question, it's round 2, item 5?
Yes.
We have it. It should be popping up now, John.
Is it there now?
Oh, I do see it now, yes. But
Okay.
go ahead, sorry.
And I'm not, like I said, I'm not sure that you are the best person to ask, but could you clarify whether the person who does the reconnection is actual employee of Farmers R.E.C.C. or if it's a field like a third-party contractor?
I don't know that answer.
Okay, all right. We'll just ask that in a post-hearing data request then.
They do say that it's with a company truck, so I would infer that they mean it's a company employee, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay, thank you. And then, I don't know if you'll know this other part. Do you know whether, the reconnects can be performed remotely for most of the customers, or is it always an at-the-meter process?
I don't know that answer.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. This part you may know. Since some of the customers have AMI meters and some do not, were you all able to determine whether the reconnection charge is charged for all the customers or only the ones without the AMI meters?
I don't know that answer.
Okay.
I could speculate, but I don't know.
Okay, that's okay.
I believe all of those questions would be for Ms. Phelps.
Phelps.
If we want to recall her and not have to do them post-hearing, we can.
Okay. I know she was excused, but I'll,
Oh, I'm sorry.
She's made the terrible decision to remain in the courtroom.
They're not letting her leave.
okay, let me see if there's any more that might be better suited. I'll save the last one for you then. With regard to the pending pass-through case, just generally, how will this case be impacted by the pass-through case? Just like in the general sense.
So I think it will be the other way around. I don't think this case will be impacted by the pass-through case because this case should, pursuant to my understanding of procedural schedules, this case should end first, and setting aside rehearing or whatnot, I think what the company expects to do is to take the ordered rates in this docket and then apply them to the pass-through calculations. In other words, to update the pass-through calculations to replace the present rates in the pass-through case, which right now are what's in the tariff, with whatever the commission orders in this docket, and then therefore update the exhibits in the pass-through to reflect the outcome of this docket.
So I know you're the witness who sponsored those exhibits in the pass-through, so your intention is to update all of those once the final order is issued in this case?
Yes, so if this case order comes out first, the farmers would reflect that in the pass-through as an update in that docket. And the long-term effect, which is what you're getting at, I think, would be that whatever this increase is will be passed through to the members, and then the pass-through of the East Kentucky wholesale increase will also be passed through. So that will be sort of layered on top, whichever one comes first.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Yes.
Commissioner Wood?
No questions.
Commissioner Reagan?
I don't.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to ask you the question that I asked earlier to Mr. Moss, I believe, about the time of use rate for change that we're making to adjust for the time zone. And he had suggested you might be the better person to ask. Could you explain that to me? We are always baffled by time zone changes in general in this state.
Time zone changes, yeah, well, they are complex in Kentucky because the line runs right through the Commonwealth,
Yeah.
right? So it might help me if we could call up the exhibit that shows the redlined tariff, which is somewhere in the application early on.
And I know it's a very broad question, but just in general, how did the time zone affect this time of use charge, and what are we doing about it? Or being requested to do about it?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to refresh myself on exactly what that change is, because that particular term and condition doesn't really flow through the cost of service study. The rate changes, the customer charge in the rate changes, and,
The time of day customer charge is proposed to increase, this is for residential, from
Right.
$23.97 to $27.79.
yes.
And the off-peak marketing energy charge, so the energy charge also had a proposed increase. And it was not clear to me how the central time versus Eastern Standard Time affected that.
So, Counselor, I think the exhibit you were just showing me was good.
I'm sorry. I was trying to go to.
You're right clicking.
Oh, sorry. I was trying to go to the customer notice because our tariffs do not show the energy charges changing.
Yeah, my understanding was that only the actual
Customer charge.
customer charge, from $23.97 up to $27.79 was the proposed rate change. I did not
Okay.
think we made other rate changes or changes to the period, the on-peak or off-peak
I
periods.
may be incorrect. What I'm looking at said, proposing to increase the residential off-peak marketing energy charge from 0.065808 per kilowatt hour to 0.0731193 per kilowatt hour. And I'm looking at a summary, not your direct testimony right now, so it may not be accurate.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I was looking at the residential time of day
Yeah,
and
that
not
one?
at the off-peak marketing. I apologize. So that's the
Well, I did ask
ETS.
you about both of them at once.
Oh, no, that's
I
fine.
could have asked the question so many better ways,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, you think the time zone's hard, the rate class names, they're even tougher. So, on this,
Time of day, commercial service.
oh, yes, okay, so this is on the ETS. So what we did there was we changed, yeah, that's not it either,
that not
that's the
either?
commercial. It's going to be the one is Schedule RM,
Okay.
as in residential marketing. Yes, and I can broadly explain what we did.
I'm just talking about this stuff.
Right there,
Okay,
schedule RM.
I'm
okay.
looking at the
We're,
wrong thing.
we're in the right spot now.
Yeah.
I think that's pulled up now, John, the RM.
Oh, yeah, that looks much more complex, doesn't it? Okay, I see where you mean that. Okay, so with respect to the time zones, that was the area that you were zoomed in on the question?
How does the time
Sure.
zone affect it?
12 to 5 Eastern Standard, 11 to 4. Okay, so I think what that is effectively just stating the time periods in Central Time Zone instead of Eastern, so that I see on the red line copy that it used to go from 12 noon to 5 p.m. on Eastern, and that's restated as 11 to 4 p.m. on Central, which is the same hours of the day. It's just reporting it in the tariff in Central because that's most of what, I think, if not all, of what Farmers Territory is on Central. So they wouldn't want to have a tariff that lists times in Eastern when all of your members are on Central. So they didn't actually move the hours, they just display it in Central Time instead of Eastern Time. I'm sure, subject to
So
check
it's
here.
just a
9 to
matter of
10.
how it's being listed.
It
And
is
it's
just the
been
labeling.
listed inaccurately as Eastern Standard Time for years?
Yeah, I would assume so. I don't know how many years it goes back, but certainly since the last case, it's been that way. So people have, presumably the members have just had to do that conversion in their minds, should they be looking at the tariff. But that is all that's happening. It doesn't actually move the hours, it's just relabeling them in the time zone that most, if not actually all, of the members are in.
And it doesn't impact the rate.
It does
It's
not
just the
impact the
same
rate.
hours.
It's just how it's being stated.
I didn't even know about it until you
Got
asked the question,
it, okay.
to be candid, so yes, that's
Okay.
true. Yeah.
And then I think it was different for May through September and then October through April, but, okay.
Yes, I think the key there is looking at it in the red line form, and then you can sort of see that every hour that was listed on Eastern just moves back 1 hour when it's relabeled as Central.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that makes a difference for temperature and all the things that we have time of day use rates. for.
If it were an actual change to the hours, that would have made a big difference. Since it's really just the labeling, then it doesn't have any impact,
Okay.
other than
Did you
member
have a question,
understanding.
too? Okay. And then as far as the customer use charges, you and I have had discussions in lots of cases that you testified in about the changes for increasing customer charges rather than increasing energy charges. This one is a little bit different in that they're actually proposing to decrease the energy charge. Could you sort of explain the thinking there?
Yes, that's true. It is a little different because a lot of the time, the changes to the rates are usually based on a combination of what the revenue shortfall is and where the current rates are, right? And you look at where the cost study says they should be, and in here, the co-op needs $2.3 million. And when you look at where the rates are today versus what the cost of service says those charges should be, the energy charge in the tariff is higher than what the cost study says, and the customer charge in the tariff is lower than what the cost study says. And so we are adjusting, both the board of directors was interested in moving closer to cost-based rates, and for the reasons Mr. Moss explained, very interested in moving the fixed charge closer to actual fixed cost. So they said, the board said, let's propose to move it to set the customer charge at the cost-based rate. And that would generate, in combination with the handful of other rates that are tied to it, the net metering, the other residentials, that would generate more than the required amount, the 2.4 million that's required to hit the 1.85 tier. So we lowered the energy charge because, in order to hit that total amount, but also because it's higher than the cost to serve. So it's a very consistent approach with farmers' interests in moving towards cost-based rates. They're doing both. They're moving the energy charge closer, and they're moving the fixed charge closer in a way that allows them to achieve the target revenue deficiency.
And it would all be sort of with the goal in mind that revenue does not need to be so dependent on weather for how much the utility is able to bring in.
I think that's a very big part of it. I mean, the co-op has seen, in the last case, they tried to move much closer to cost-based rates. They were awarded almost the full amount, I think 90% of the revenue they asked for, but then they ultimately ended up not being able to achieve it. I mean, there's more than one factor, but one of the factors is that the increase in the customer charge was smaller than they had asked, and certainly smaller than the cost study said it should be. So they really couldn't get there because the usage, the consumption, it didn't materialize.
Mild weather.
Mild weather. And I mean, there could be other factors, growth, a business opens up a new line of manufacturing or whatever. Those factors exist too, but primarily it's weather driven since they have so much residential consumption. So it really emphasizes the importance of moving towards much closer, as the board has proposed here, to the cost-based customer charge and the cost-based energy charge, even when it means lowering it, because then you're not betting so much on this weather wager, right? You're lining up with the costs, you're becoming more indifferent, and then economically indifferent to, and matching up to your actual costs.
And that's thought to be better for low-income customers because they know what to plan for?
I think that's true. In my view, it's better for all customers when you move rates closer to the actual cost to serve. Because then it removes or minimizes that sort of subsidy between the fixed cost part of the bill and the variable part of the bill. So that if you use a lot, you pay for a lot. If you use nothing, you pay for nothing. Moving towards cost-based rates achieves that. The folks who maybe won't like that customer charge going up so much aren't what we call low-income consumers. It's the low-usage consumers. The hunting cabin or the lake house or the barn, who they're not there, but they have to pay a higher customer charge every month even though they're not there. But the fact is, that's what it costs farmers to be able to provide service to those folks, whether they use anything or not. So that's why moving towards those cost-based rates up or down is better, not just for any subset of consumers, but for all of them, because it sends the most efficient cost signal, price signal to the consumer about what it costs farmers in order to be able to serve them.
So I asked Ms. Phelps earlier about the fact that they had raised the customer charge just 2.5 years ago in the 23 case by $4, and she wasn't able to see much appreciable difference. Had we had a less mild weather year in 2024, is it your expectation that we would have been able to see more of a difference from raising that customer charge?
I'm sure if consumers had used more, you would have seen more of an impact there, but it wouldn't necessarily head off the need to come back in, because all these costs, including these fixed costs, I shouldn't say all, many of these costs are just going up. We're in a rising cost, inflationary environment. All these other co-ops, they're seeing them on a second and third rate filing, in part because they're not going all the way to cost-based rates, but also in part because costs are just going up, and consumption is either flat or going down. So there's a lot of factors. Storms, talked about that. All these things point to really not just the rate design where you adjust the fixed cost and the variable cost to cost-based rates, but it also gets to the O tier, the overall margins. We talked a lot today about budget. Budget is driven by in part by how much revenue, the first step in the budget, how much revenue you're going to collect, and that comes down to your rates and your billing determinants, what customers are going to use. So you do that to set your budget. We can't put things in the budget that, for storm damage or for tree trimming or whatever else, if the revenue's not going to be there. So you have to do that rate design correctly, but you also have to give the co-op enough, they have to have enough margin to be able to spend the money on these things, or else the budget is a meaningless document. So it's really a balance of both. It's giving them the full margins that they need, which in my view, they don't have. And they're just doing what we always do. You know, we're following the rules. We're using the 2.0 tier that the commission's awarded for decades, or the 1.850 tier that the commission has set forth in the regulation. I would like to see those higher because I don't think they're high enough in this inflationary environment, but they are what they are. We're pulling out the donations and the Kentucky Living and the everything else because they have for decades. Now, this one co-op recently decided to do it a little differently, and so with the Kentucky Living, and I think other co-ops, as Ms. Phelps said, will very much look at that. But, you know, co-ops aren't IOUs, they are different, and so I think there's a lot of pressure on the co-ops to get the rate design right and to get the margin they need to be able to cover these things like the tree trimming or the storm restoration or whatever else it is that they have to do as co-ops to meet their obligations to the lenders and to the members.
So when they're budgeting for right-of-way and when they're trying to determine how much revenue will come in this year as part of the budgeting process, they also need to be able to predict the weather. And we're trying to lessen that
Well,
if we raise the.
they will, the pressure on them to predict the weather will be much higher if they are not awarded rates that reflect actual costs. So if the commission were to award the $27.79 and their costs did not continue to, fixed costs don't continue to increase, then it's reasonable to expect they'll be much more likely, or I'm sorry, it will be less important for them to predict the weather. Because once you're at cost-based rates, you become economically indifferent to that, all else being equal.
So, nationwide, cost of utility bills have been rising at double the rate of inflation. It's not quite that bad in Kentucky, but in general across the nation. And a lot of that has been attributed to weather, but also to just increasing costs and inflation. Someone told me that the cost of electric poles has gone up by 75%. Cost of a transformer is double. Are there other examples you could point to, like the general costs that are going up for utilities?
So I think the company witnesses described some of that in the testimony. In my personal experience, we've seen it with outside contractors, particularly on tree trimming, if they outsource that activity. Several other co-ops have come in almost exclusively because of rising costs for tree trimming. Yeah, transformers is a biggie, conductor is a biggie. IT support can be one, depending on where you're at with your systems with respect to AMI implementation and billing system upgrades. Cybersecurity costs, another one that's going up quite a bit because utilities have to have information protected and whatnot in their systems. And then, of course, the wholesale power bill, which, as Ms. Phelps said, 71% of the bill. We've got to, the non-fuel clause related aspects of that have to be accounted for as well. So it's in my view, it's many areas of the co-op's expenses. It would almost be hard to find one that's not going up, I think.
And that was going to be my
Versus
next
the other way
question.
around.
Are there any costs that have not gone up as much as expected that are being controlled better?
Well, that's the thing about farmers and other co-ops like it. I think they have been conditioned over the years because there's no shareholders, or it's all customers. They're lean organizations, right? These are not large IOUs with 40 people in the accounting department where Ms. Phelps has a handful of employees. They already operate. And I think Mr. Moss testified in the application that their headcount was reduced from 74 or something like that down to 60 or so just in the last, let's say, 10 years. So they're operating as a very lean operation, this co-op. And they're doing what they can to manage the costs that they can. But I think, as Ms. Phelps indicated, the number of levers they have is very limited, or they're very small, one or the other. So you can kind of try to control costs, but how many levers you have and how big they are is a factor. And the only real big ones they have are going to be labor, right-of-way, depreciation, which I guess you really can't do anything about because your plant is depreciating. It's an expense you have to have on your books. And after that, it drops off pretty heavily into many more but much smaller expenditures that won't make near as much of a difference. And if you've already reduced your headcount to about as lean as you can get, then that cuts down the payroll option, which leaves right away. So there's not much they can do to operate more lean, which is why I personally think, the O tier and the tier metrics that we've adhered to in many years are just too low. When you look at the rest of the country, all states, I think except maybe one, are higher than us. And it can be good to be low, but to be at the very, very lowest in this case when they're operating this lean, and you're not, and actually, one other thought, sorry to go on a little spin here, but what Ms. Phelps talked about for hitting tier, for her tier metrics this year so far,
I'm sorry.
they're only able to hit the metrics that they're hitting year to date on O tier so far because they're cutting. They're stopping expenditures that they consider discretionary in order to not violate those lender agreements. So you might say, oh, yeah, they're doing fine. They're at the 1 point something or other O tier, but that's because she's responding in real time to the fact that the first quarter was a weak one for margins. So they're adapting and cutting back. So they're not doing everything they should be. Not a judgment, just an observation in response to their performance, to the rates, to the revenue being too low. So they're cutting the tree trimming. And to do it right, they will just need more money. It's not a question of budget or what they decide to put in the budget. They need the revenue, which means they need a bigger increase. They need the full increase they're asking for here and probably more. And they need the rate design they're asking for to reduce that dependency on weather. And beyond that, they don't have any levers to pull, in my opinion, to effectively run a safe and reliable system in an affordable way.
Could you have something else?
Based on your experience, how far below are we than other states?
So the last time I looked at data from the Cooperative Finance Corporation, I don't know if all 50 states were listed, but many states were listed, and I think Kentucky, on average, with respect to I can't remember now if it was tier or O tier, so I'll just say margin metric, one of those two. I think there was one state lower than Kentucky, and every other state, the average co-ops, tier or O tier, whichever it was higher than ours.
Average being 3, 4, higher than that, off the top of your head?
Like what is the number?
Yeah, do you,
So on this chart, I don't remember, but I can tell you, I do work for electric cooperatives in Indiana, in Ohio, in North Carolina, in Colorado. I did one in Tennessee, and they're all in the range of 2.5 for tier, sometimes 3, and then if it ends up that they make more than what they need, then that flows back to the members through capital credits because they're not for-profit organizations. So that's, again, is one of the big differences between the investor owns. But at least they don't, when they don't do that, when they don't have that healthy tier on the front end, they end up taking on a lot more short-term debt because you need the money. A storm comes up, FEMA's not going to pay for a year or two, if at all. You need to pay for the restoration, so you borrow if you don't have the margins, and you only have the margins if your rates are big enough, high enough. So it ends up being a trade-off, tier and metrics and rates versus interest expense on short-term debt over time. So it's a gamble. If you hope it's hot this summer or cold this winter and you hope you don't have any storms, well, that's a bad plan. It just is. Particularly here when the risk of the downside of any overcollection is super low because you are not for profit. So it's all going to flow back to the members anyway in a form of capital credits over time. And so that's why I can't say it enough. The history maybe hasn't shown it, and there's rules and regulations and process in the co-ops. I'll follow it, but those rules, in my view, look like they're largely designed for investor-owns, where you have to protect the consumers against the shareholder interest of the investor-owned. We don't have that interest here, so it's a different bird. You follow the rules, but I think it ends up putting extra pressure on the co-op in order to run the business.
so would it be your recommendation we take a look at the statutes and regulations and rules?
So I'm not an attorney, and I'm certainly not a politician,
Yeah.
but I would love that. Because I think for the co-op, it would be very beneficial because they do operate differently. In my rebuttal testimony, I included some exhibits that sort of outlined, and I testified a little bit to the difference between the investor-owns and the co-ops, and it's largely this shareholder-driven interest, but also the co-op's desire to be involved in the community and to cooperate with each other, and they're democratically controlled, and all that, the board of directors, all that's very different than the investor-owned. So I do think it's worth, they're not going to stop being co-ops. They're not going to stop investing in, and I think I said in my rebuttal, Mr. Meyer's right. There's a problem with when you remove donations, you do create a problem because the co-op is going to continue to support its community through some level of donations. We could discuss or debate or the level, but they're not going to go to zero because co-ops aren't supposed to do that. And so, yes, they follow the rules, they pull them out, and yes, they adhere to tradition or precedent and try to shoot for the 2.0 tier, but all that just puts extra pressure on the co-op in ways that are sort of not aligned with what the co-op's really about. So that's a lot of words that means yes to your question, sorry, but
No, I
hope
appreciate
that's
it,
helpful.
thank you.
Redirect.
I just have a very couple. There's been a lot of discussion about Farmer's last rate case, the streamline rate case. And I believe you did prepare the cost of service study for that case as well.
I did.
If you recall, the people have said they got a $4 increase in their customer charge, but that's not what they asked for, correct? They asked to move much closer to the cost of service in that streamline case as well.
That's true. My recollection was that that in the last streamline case, farmers requested a certain amount of total revenue, and they requested that the increase be applied to the residential class. I think it was only the residential class, and it was primarily customer charge. And what I think the order awarded almost the full amount, 97% I think was my number, for how much they got awarded. But then the rate design piece and the allocation to classes was different than farmers asked for. And they not only reduced the customer charge award and put some on energy, but then they also spread some of the money out to the other rate classes, which were already carrying their fair share. But so they didn't get what they asked for on the allocation or on the rate design, but the total dollars awarded was relatively close.
And so that's what keeps creating this problem where if the commission keeps increasing the energy charge but doesn't move to the full cost of service, they're never going to be able to make up that difference to get their discretionary spending where it needs to be to trim the right of way, whatever else.
So I can't say never, because if
Okay.
you did have a screaming hot summer or a freezing cold winter, you might. But all else being equal, that is true. If your customer charges, you're chasing it, the co-op in a mild sort of weather scenario or a rising cost scenario, which we've had both, or a high storm scenario, which we've had that too. You'll be chasing it. You'll be always chasing it. And even getting to the cost-based rates will help you, but it may not cover all of it in a rising cost environment.
And then you also talked about, like standardly, the commission does either a 1.850 tier or a 2.0 tier. And we've talked about some other cooperatives and their requests. The commission has awarded a 1.850 tier, which did result in a higher than a 2.0 tier in a couple recent cases that you've been in.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, so the 1.85 is the maximum allowed under the streamlined regulation. And the 2.0 is more just of not in the streamlined, it's more just of a traditional or conventional basis for setting metrics in these rate cases by co-ops. But in some of those, in at least two of the recent streamlined cases where the 1.850 tier was awarded, that 1.850 tier did correspond to a tier that was higher than 2.0. So that just comes down to what your non-operating margins are, but
That is all I have, thank you.
Okay, recross.
No, Your Honor.
Steph, just one real quick. Mr. Wolfram, in your testimony, in your rebuttal testimony, I believe it starts on page 7 of your rebuttal.
yes.
Okay. So the AG made an argument about the exhibit JW2 not matching JW9.
Yes.
And so as a result, basically, I believe the witness basically said you were understating your revenues.
Yes, I think that's what he said. The revenue requirement net revenues have been understated by $558,000 and some change.
Okay. is there ever a time when and you generally label your exhibits the same every time, so is there a time when your exhibit 2 would match your exhibit 9?
I don't think in any of the cases that I filed that that's the case. And actually, I don't even limit it to me. In the other cases I've reviewed or participated in, going all the way back to when I was at LG&E, 2004. The LG&E cases that were conducted by another firm that I worked at for a while, where I learned how to do all these kinds of exhibits, it would be the same thing. You know, the revenue requirement is driven off actuals, plain and simple. The booked revenue from the co-op or from the utility. And my Exhibit 9 is based on a sort of a reconstruction of billings if you took those billing determinants, usage and customer count, and applied the tariff rate to it. In real life, that's not what happens. Some customers don't pay the bill, or they pay late, or there's billing corrections, or they resend a bill out later, or there's other factors. I don't take that into effect for Exhibit 9. Exhibit 9 is just supposed to be an incremental analysis of, at these billing determinants, the classes that are changing, old rate, new rate, what's the difference, and I adjust that new rate until I get the $2.4 million. So it's not supposed to. In a perfect world, maybe they could, but in my experience, there have always been differences between the revenue requirement, the way we calculate some of the pro forma adjustments, which are kind of top down in a lot of cases, and what we put in Exhibit 9, which is purely an incremental revenue calculation.
So when you, I know you gave an explanation, so basically, in your opinion, the revenues aren't understated, that Exhibit 9 just reflects something different than Exhibit 2?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Exhibit 9 is intended to reflect an incremental calculation of how much the rate has to go up in order to yield the target revenue increase at the adjusted test year billing determinants, with no other actual considerations of, late charges or people not paying their bills, or it's a recalculation based on the ideal of amount of billing determinant times old rate versus new rate. So yeah, they're not supposed to be the same. Now they could be. It's possible if you want to go to all the extra work to produce a full revenue proof, but that's not really the purpose of Exhibit 9, right? That's a different purpose. So I'm not trying to validate the test your actuals. I'm trying to calculate the incremental rate.
Okay, thank you.
Tim? Okay. Anything?
No.
Any reason this witness couldn't be excused? All right, thank you, Mr. Wolfram, yes.
Thank you.
And is that your final witness?
Does staff want us to recall Ms. Phelps to answer those questions instead of doing them post-hearing?
She just moved, but she's still here.
I thought she had wisely skedaddled. Is that useful? Since it's being
It
offered?
might speed things up.
Sure.
We would then recall Ms. Phelps just for a few moments.
And Ms. Phelps, you're still under oath.
Okay,
Steph?
thank you. I know you heard me start to ask Mr. Wolfram about the non-recurring charges, and with regard to the reconnection charge, is that a field service representative with Farmers, or is that a third-party contractor?
It is an employee of Farmers.
Okay, and then are reconnections generally done within normal business hours, 8 to 5?
Yes, we try to do those during normal business hours.
Do you track whether they occur outside of normal business hours? Like if it was the 9 o'clock one, would you have any way of tracking that?
Yes, we would know if it was after hours. Of course, they're employees of Farmers, so of course, payroll time could show that in overtime, according to what they're doing.
Okay. And then I know we've asked some questions in one of the data requests about AMI capabilities. And is there any way to confirm that a reconnection charge or a disconnection charge would not have been charged to a person with an AMI meter with those capabilities?
put that in post-data hearing request.
Okay.
I think that might be best answered by someone else within the organization, so.
So my other question's kind of connected to that. Do you all track, are customers charged a disconnection charge and a reconnection charge?
Let's put that in a post-hearing data request. Sorry, I'm not saving you any time whatsoever.
That's okay, no, it's fine. And then I think with regard to the meter test charge, I believe you all basically said you're under recovering. You've decided that the $40 is all you want to include in the charge for the customer. Have you considered increasing that amount at all?
We have not. Of course, in this case, we did not look at the non-recurring charges. If you look at our miscellaneous revenue as a total percentage of revenue, I mean, it is a very small percentage, maybe 2% overall. So our primary focus in this case, of course, was to look at the cost of service study to see what that fixed charge needed to be. So to say that we've looked at that in detail, we have not.
Okay, I'm gonna just ask one more then. The trip charge. Could you give us an example of what that would look like? What event might result in a trip charge being charged for a customer?
What number are we looking at? What?
It would be, I think the initial cost justification was provided in staff's second request, item 8.
Pull up.
Oh, it didn't,
It's not working.
Oh.
Could we just have that in a post-data hearing request as well?
Okay, that's fine. That's all staff.
That's it?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I do believe Ms. Phelps was, had a response to your question about the time zone change.
Oh, okay.
Well, we are a member of East Kentucky Power, one of 16, and we are the only co-op that's in the central time zone. And I think that's a
That's the
classic
answer
tear up
to my
there.
question.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we just
Figure out
wanted to
how
correct it
in
on
the
central.
world.
Yeah,
Got it.
Yeah.
All right.
okay.
Anything further? Anything further? Nope. All right. And is that your case?
Yes.
You may be excused again. All right. Attorney General, Mr. Lacy, if you'd like to call your next witness.
The Attorney General calls Greg Meyer as a witness.
Good afternoon, Mr. Meyer. Would you raise your right hand to be sworn? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Please have a seat, and counsel you may ask.
Mr. Meyer, can you please state your full name for the record?
Greg R. Meyer,
And what is your business address?
16690 Swingley Ridge Road, Suite 140, Chesterfield, Missouri, 63017.
And Mr. Meyer, what is your occupation?
I'm a regulatory auditor.
Did you cause direct testimony to be filed in this case?
I did.
Did you have any additional corrections or additions to your direct testimony?
Well, I have a revised testimony, and there's no
Right.
changes to that.
Okay. Is it your intent to adopt your direct written testimony as your testimony in this matter?
It is?
Chair, the witness is now available for cross-examination.
Okay.
We have no questions.
Staff.
We have no questions.
Oh, Commissioner Wood,
No, I don't have any questions. either.
Commissioner Reagan.
I don't.
I do have a little bit. You've heard the testimony today about the recommended or requested customer charge, and lots of justifications for a fairly drastic increase in customer charge. $9, I think it would go up under this request. Do you have an opinion?
Well, I didn't specifically look at the customer charge in this case. I was more driven by the revenue requirement. The one thing I will say is that generally, I think there's a big push and concern about affordability of all utility service rates today. And I had the opportunity to review a recent article where Kentucky, Oklahoma, and Louisiana were singled out as they're not, the rate increases are not going or conjunction with the increases in utility services. So I think there's a huge need to look at these things. Customer charges, as Mr. Wolfram says, will guarantee more recovery of revenues, and not subject a utility to variations in weather. I think there was a lot of discussion about the weather and how it fluctuates. And I was here, I can't remember what case it was, but I know I talked with you specifically that one of the ways to correct that is to make sure that when you come up with a revenue stream, that stream of revenues reflects normal weather, so that it's not based off of a test year that's either too hot or too cold or not, or
So
abnormal.
normalizing the weather?
Right. Normalizing weather is a standard, operating condition that's, done on many utilities that I'm involved in. And it's based off of, I've seen weather based off 10 years, 20 years, 30 years NOAA data where you measure cooling degree days and heating degree days against what you think will be, and then you establish that norm so that you've now minimized as best you can the effects of weather. It doesn't solve it by any means, but it does by creating normal weather patterns or rates on normal weather. You reduce the risk that your rates are either set too high or too low.
What's normal weather?
Well, that's
It's not normalized based
there you
on-
go, and that's the many utilities that I'm involved in use 30 years, because they say that then the fluctuations, because you look at 30 years that you've now centered down to a normal level. Some use 10, some use 20. It's really up to the commission to determine what level you want to do. If you're seeing trends of warming trends, you may want to go to a shorter period. Now, the only thing I would caution you on is that when you do shorter trends for, let's say, natural gas, because you say it's warming up, you're having warmer winters and stuff like that, that you make sure that you do it consistent through all your utility sectors. So you do it on natural gas usage and electric usage, because at least in Missouri, I heat with natural gas and I cool with air conditioning. So if the commission is convinced that the winters are becoming warmer and they want to go to a shorter period for that time, then they need to also reflect it in the electricity cost, because several Missouri residents heat with electric, and also the summers are becoming, would probably follow that trend of being warmer than normal. So you want to make sure you consistently apply it across all your utility sectors.
Seems like there's an awful lot of ways we can do this wrong.
Well, but not doing anything
Yeah.
is probably worse.
All right, anything further? Redirect, sorry.
No, Your Honor.
Nothing further from staff?
No.
All right, any reason this witness couldn't be excused? Okay, you're excused, sir, thank you. All right, I believe that was our last witness then.
That is correct.
We don't have any exhibits to deal with, any motions at this time? Okay, staff, can you issue written summaries of your request by September 24th?
Yes.
Okay, and assuming September 24th, everything is issued, would October 1st be adequate to respond?
Yes.
All right. Our final order is due March 5th. Suspension date is November.
I believe so, and we're trying to meet the suspension.
We're doing our best to meet the suspension date then. Okay, and if parties want to do briefs, simultaneous brief by October 8th. And simultaneous response by the 16th. Okay. And if that works for everybody, then I think we're done. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate everyone's participation today, and we are adjourned.